Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Monkey Wrench. I'm Kelly, the monkey with the wrench. Help! I need somebody.
I ain't heard no fat lady.
I am so stuck like Chuck after decades of working on these machines. I need your help. Yes, you watching right now. Bob, Jim, Jeff, Jamie, Samantha, Virginia, Lucy, whoever you are. Somebody help me. Chicanic, if you're watching. Taryl, somebody help me with this stupid machine that's driving me crazy.
Please subscribe.
What I've got here is a Troy built XP Mustang. It's a 50-inch cut. And the dog is barking. What do you want? It'll take him 5 minutes to get over here. What's up, buddy? Huh? Hey, buddy. Hey, buddy. That little tail wagging. Put a fan on it and make him do something. All right, go inside. Hey, go. Go. Customer brings it to me. I've seen this machine before. You've seen it on the channel before. I just released a video that was specifically a members only video, but it was also for the customer, so it's been made public. It's the last video. I believe it went live yesterday. I'm going to be rambling a lot, but there is a point to this, and I really do need your help. He brings me the machine, and he says he can start it. It has problems starting. He's using carb spray. So, okay, that's easy. That's a carburetor issue. We'll clean the carbs. We ended up replacing the carb because the fuel solenoid was leaking and it was half broken. It just got old and it wasn't working right. So we replaced the carb. And he says, when I turn on the blades, the motor wants to die. Now, if you've been watching these videos or you've worked on them yourself, you know that normally that can be a spark issue where you're only running on one cylinder. And you can usually tell that by popping off one spark plug at a time if it's a twin and seeing if it'll run on one cylinder or the other. And then you usually know that you have an issue. It could be a valve issue. It could be a magneto issue. But you're usually running on one cylinder. And yeah, I'm all verklempt because I've been working on this thing for weeks and I can't figure it out. And so you track it down. You know, you find out why the one cylinder is not working. You get it back working and you're good to go. Well, I started by popping the spark plugs off. I did one side, started the machine, started just fine. I plugged it back in, popped the other side off, started the machine, it started just fine. So I'm trying to figure it out, and then I realize it only happens sometimes. And when I first got it, I tried cutting a few lawns with it. I cut 3 lawns with it. By the end of the third lawn, it finally started stalling on me whenever I'd turn on the blades, and I'd turn off the blades and it would stay running, or it would start right back up, and then I'd make it 5 feet and it would cut off again. And I went, okay, now I understand the problem. But when I was doing the first 2 lawns or 2.5 lawns, what I'd notice is that this particular machine, when you go in reverse, it cuts the blades off. It's got a safety on it. On the key, you've seen these before. You have to put it into the middle position. You have to push and hold the button until the light lights up. And then you can actually mow in reverse. The blades won't stop. So, okay, I noticed a couple of times when I was reversing and it was still cutting that the blades would shut off like they were supposed to as I needed to back up for whatever reason. And as soon as I started back forward, the blades would not come back on. So it happened over and over and over. And I realized, okay, we've got some kind of an electrical issue, or we've got some kind of a PTO problem. We'll have to deal with that too. So fast forward, I've tried everything you can think of on this thing, and I still cannot make it stop. I have ripped every wire out of this entire machine. Now, there's been a whole lot of testing that brought me to that fact. We didn't know if it was going to be a safety switch that was causing an issue. Something was shorting out. Something was making it run just fine when the blades were off. But when you turn on the blades, sometimes it would work. And then eventually, after a minute or so, it would bog the engine down and make it stop. Other times it would run for half an hour before doing it. And now it's gotten to the point where it happens immediately. So we decided, let's bypass all the safeties because he just wants to be able to use his machine. And I ripped all the wires out of this thing. I cut the harnesses off, period. There were 6 safety switches on the machine. There's hidden diodes in the wiring harness, stuff like that. So I went ahead and cut out the wires, removed the whole system. And I wired everything in individually. I wired the battery to the key to the starting solenoid, so that when you turn the key, it would send power to the solenoid, start the machine. I also wired an independent power wire to the fuel solenoid on the carburetor, so that when you turn the key, it opens the solenoid up so that it allows fuel to flow. And at that point, I would start the machine, turn it off with the key, no problem. Then after that, I set up the wires for the charging system to the battery independently, and then I finally set up wires to the PTO clutch that came from the battery to the PTO switch, back down to the PTO clutch, and I used the ground to the ground so that we had a complete circuit. Now, the hardest part through all of that was that I was convinced that the PTO clutch was having issues on top of everything else, and I've been waiting for it to get here in the mail. So there wasn't a whole lot of testing I could do. I had this thing up on jacks, and I didn't want to take it down to test it, to put it back up, knowing the PTO clutch was causing issues as well. So I tested the PTO clutch. And while I was doing that, it started sparking, and the magnet got stuck. It wouldn't release. So that's when I spoke to him and said, listen, we need to replace the PTO clutch. This thing is smoking and it's sparking, and it won't release. So I couldn't test all the wiring until the new PTO clutch came. New PTO clutch comes, I hook it up. This thing, I've been starting it 6, 8, 10 times a day, every single day for a week. I've had 0 issues. It starts immediately, it runs, it cuts off, it does exactly what it's supposed to do. I let it idle one day for 45 minutes, no issues. Well, I was waiting for the PTO clutch to come. It was a day late. It was supposed to be here on Tuesday. It didn't show up until Wednesday. I contacted the company and said, where the hell is it? They said, oh, you'll have it by 3 o'clock today. But he's been waiting to cut his grass for weeks, and we're in Florida in the middle of at the end of summer. Grass is grown. I'm sure he's got a mess. And he's been going, how do we get this thing done? How do we get this thing done? So I pulled the PTO clutch, the old PTO clutch, off. I pulled the shell apart. The magnet clicked right off. I put it back together. I put power to it. And sure enough, clink, 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 it's working just the way it was supposed to. Somehow it had shorted itself and gotten stuck. So I said, okay, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm expecting this part by 3 o'clock, but the PTO clutch only takes 10 minutes to put on. It's already up on jacks. Let's put the old one on and see if we can salvage this. Let me put the old one back on and see if I can let him pick up the machine, take it home, cut his grass, then drop it back off to put the new PTO on if the thing didn't come in. So I put it on. I pulled the thing down off the jack stands. I started it up. I made it 2 feet across the yard with the blades on, and the thing bogged out and shut off. Same problem as before. This is with new carburetor, all new independent wiring, and the old PTO clutch. So now I'm sitting here going, yep, it's definitely caused by the PTO clutch. We've done everything else that we could. Well, luckily, an hour later, the new PTO clutch arrived. So I put it back up on jacks, took the old PTO clutch back off, put the new PTO clutch on. For those of you watching that don't know, that's the bit underneath that the belt goes around. So when you pull the button, this button right here, this button right here, you hear that click? That's an electromagnet. When you hear that click, it's pulling the magnet up and holding it so that it will spin and allow the belt to spin and turn your blades.
Get on with it.
Yes, get on with it!
So I put the new PTO clutch on, pulled it back down off the jack stands. Same thing, 5 feet, and it wants to die. Now I'm getting really frustrated and really pissed off because I'm out of pocket over $300 on parts. The new PTO clutch was $167. I bought a carburetor, I bought a blade belt, I bought a fuel pump. I bought all this out of my own pocket, and I've been eating ramen noodles for weeks now because this seems to be the month where no one wants to pay me. My lawn customers aren't paying me. The guy that's supposed to come here and pick up his weed eaters that have been fixed now for a long time hasn't paid me, and I put out money on parts for that too. So I'm literally have $4 to my name, and I'm eating ramen noodles for weeks. So now I'm frustrated. I need my money back for these parts, and I can't figure out what's going on with this thing. So in a last-ditch effort to check things that I haven't checked, let me tell you all the things that I did check.
It's friggin' scooter time!
I did check compression in both cylinders. It's at 175 psi. Both sides are exactly the same, and 175 is very high, so we're good there. I've done a leak down test. I have no leakage to speak of. I think it's at 5% or something. So I know my cylinders are good. I changed the spark plugs one at a time, turning it on, testing it to see if there was any difference, and engaging the PTO clutch to see if one spark plug was bad or one wasn't. One was pretty white. It looked like it was burned a little bit, so I replaced that anyway. No difference. And remember, every single time I fix or check something or change something, I'm starting the machine the full Monty and seeing the same things happening. So I changed the spark plugs. I put on a new fuel pump. I've pulled the fuel pump off of the carburetor to check to make sure that I've got good flow going to the carburetor. I do. I've even put on a new line on the bottom of the fuel pump, the pulsation line that makes the fuel pump work, because I thought even though we just replaced it, it might have had a hole in it. So I out of pocket $8 for that. I checked the spark, I checked the spark plugs. We've got spark on both sides, and I've even put my spark tester on it while it was running, and then drove it across the yard a few feet while it happened and watched, because I have the one with the light that flickers, and watched that the light never changed. I never lost spark. That tells me my magnetos are doing just fine. I don't know what's causing this problem. So I pulled the valve covers, and the valves were out by about 10 thousandths. They were supposed to be between 4 and 6, and they were somewhere around 16 thou. So I did a valve adjustment on it, and each side I pulled each valve cover off. It's a twin. I adjusted the valves, put the valve cover back on, started the machine. Problem still happened every time I turned on the PTO clutch. Turned it back off, pulled the other side, adjusted the valves, so I would know which cylinder was worse if that were the case. So I've done a valve adjustment on this thing. I have checked spark, I have checked compression, I have checked that the pulleys are moving correctly and nothing is impeding them. I have even taken a separate battery. I undid the wires on the PTO clutch, and I attached them to a separate battery. A second battery that I put on this machine temporarily, zip tied it to the frame, so that the PTO clutch would work on its own battery and had nothing to do with the electrical system on this machine. Which all leads me back to this is some sort of a mechanical problem. But when I pulled the valve covers, everything was in working order. I spun the machine by hand slowly on both sides and watched that the rocker arms were moving the way they were supposed to. Everything had full movement. I didn't have any bent push rods. Everything was in place. Everything was fine. And aside from being out of adjustment, I see no problems. I've checked the engine over visually, and I can't find any oil leaks. So I don't think it's a blown head gasket, although it's still a possibility. If it was blown internally, when I ran it for a few minutes, I could pull the dipstick out and smoke would come out of the dipstick if it was blowing compression into the block. I cannot find anything that's telling me that this thing might have blown head gasket. It's not spitting or sputtering or anything like that. Now this problem happens whether I'm driving or not. If I started this machine, in fact, let me see if I can even show you. If I start this machine and let it set in idle, watch what happens. Well, that's a first. Now the blades are on and the engine is bogging down. It doesn't want to stay running. It's running better now than it has been all along after the valve adjustment. It used to die completely. I just put the idle down to low. That's the first time I've started it that it didn't want to run right as soon as I started it up. I haven't run it in about 12 hours since last night. But as you can see now, and that's without me driving, that's just sitting at idle. When I start to drive it, it dies under load, is my point. And I've got all kinds of crap here on the ground, so I'm not going to move it. But as you saw, it was spitting and sputting and losing power just because the PTO was on. Then when I add driving to it, it kills it. It's too much. It's trying to take too much power from the motor. But both cylinders are working. Both have full spark. Both have working valves, and the valves have been adjusted. I don't know what else to check on this thing. When I put the PTO clutch on an independent battery, it's causing me the same issue. So I'm guessing it's some sort of mechanical issue within the motor, but short of taking this motor apart completely to try to find something that's going on, do I justify taking the cover off the motor and taking all of the side covers and everything else off so I could pull the heads? That means I got to pull the carb intake. It means I got to pull the exhaust. It means I got to pull half this thing apart just to pull the head gaskets. And once you pull them, you got to replace them. So there's another 25 bucks just to pull the heads to find out that the heads are not blown, because I'm not getting, there's no smoke coming out of there. So it's not a head gasket that's blown internally. And I don't see any signs of it being blown externally. I'm just lost. Clearly, I'm going to have to, I don't understand why at this point. That's a brand new OEM carb. And sometimes it runs great and sometimes it doesn't. So I'll have to deal with that. There's not really a lot of adjustments on these carburetors. But I think whatever's causing the bog down is also causing it not to run completely smooth. But I can't figure out what it is. So please tell me if there's something I'm missing. The one thing that I do plan on doing today is pulling off both belts. I'm taking off the blade belt and I'm taking off the drive belt, which is a pain in the butt. Jack this thing all the way up and take all that apart just to disconnect the blade belt and the drive belt. The blade belt's easy, the drive belt's a pain. To see then when I turn on the PTO clutch, if I put the blade belt back on and take the drive belt off, then when I turn on the PTO clutch, does the same thing happen? Because what I'm starting to believe is, I don't know that it's an internal motor problem. It could be a transmission, a hydro pump problem. And that's what I'd be checking by taking off that belt. If I take off the drive belt, then I take the hydro pumps out of the equation. And then when I start it up, does it make it die? 30 years of working on these things, and I don't have an answer. So I know this was long-winded. Please tell me if there's some test that I'm missing, something I'm forgetting. I've been at this for weeks, and I cannot, I don't know, help, please. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Hit the like button. It's somewhere between my chin and my balls, and I'll see you soon.